Slow down. You're burdened.
Hey, welcome to Divergent Paths with Dan Dunford. I am the host of the podcast, and my name is Dan Dunford, which makes sense. This is going up a day later than normal for various reasons, mostly related to me being overworked and exhausted. So, it's coming to you 24 hours later than normal, which I hope you're okay with. And I hope you listen and enjoy it, nonetheless. So, this week's guest is Felix del Tredici, who is a really cool bass trombone player. He's based out of Montreal right now. Does a lot of really experimental stuff, and we had a really good talk. We recorded this back in October when he was in town. He's in New York fairly regularly, and we just sat down for an hour and a half and talked through some stuff. And it goes in a lot of interesting directions. We talk about a lot of really cool stuff. Some musical, some life, some existential. It's a really good talk. Just really enjoyed it. He will be performing on Sunday as part of Dave Whitwell's Radical Brass concert series at Spectrum. It'll be the normal time, 3 p.m. Sunday, March 6th. And, of course, Spectrum is at 121 Ludlow Street, number 2, here in the city. No idea what he's going to be playing, but it'll definitely be interesting, whatever it is. Really cool guy, really knowledgeable about in the new music front, and just loves music. It's sometimes I get kind of jaded. I'm kind of a jaded person about a lot of stuff, very cynical. And he's just always seemed so excited about a lot of crazy different stuff. And it's a little bit inspiring. So, at the end of the interview, as is my wont, we'll be featuring some music from Felix, among other people. This is from an album that Dave Whitwell is also featured on. We actually talked a little bit about it way back in episode 1, but the album is called The Sounds After the OilWar, and the track on the end will be Mission Accomplished, which is an improvisation by Felix, which we actually talk about near the end of this interview. It's an improvisation based on George Bush's speech aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln on May 1st, 2003, which you may or may not remember, depending on how old you were at the time. And he performs this with the Low Brass Connection, which is based out of the Netherlands. Was recorded a while ago-ish. Whitwell was on it, Dave Taylor was on it, and a huge, fantastic trombone ensemble in the Netherlands. And, it's really cool. I hope you enjoy our talk. And, if you want to see me perform, on the off chance that that's a thing you might want to do, I'm doing a performance of Carmen with Venture Opera this Saturday, March 5th, at the Diamond Horseshoe, which is the downstairs area of the Paramount Hotel on West 46th Street. So if you want to hear some good old opera with a good company, you should come out and hear it. I have some more performances coming up in the next few weeks, so keep your earballs open for that. And subscribe to the podcast if you like it, write a review, and enjoy. So we got you here in New York for what, 4 days, 5 days?
2 days.
2 days. Wait, literally only 2 days?
I mean, yeah, I got here yesterday. Today doesn't really count because we're in Philly, and then tomorrow we're recording. And yeah.
Tomorrow is just like a show in Philly, right? Or
no, today's a show in Philly.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
today.
Exactly.
Well, I've been emailing you. It's always tomorrow in Philly. Yeah,
yeah,
no,
exactly.
It's today now.
Yeah. Today in Philly, and then tomorrow we're doing the recording, and then I'm jumping on a midnight bus back to Montreal again.
Okay.
Yeah, for losing track.
Scoot up a little closer.
Scoot up. Yeah.
I mentioned to you the other day. I because you're here doing stuff fairly regularly, I forget that you don't actually live here.
Right.
I mean, I remember when I was studying with Dave Taylor, him saying, "Oh yeah, I've got this kid who comes down once a month from Montreal, and he's this guy Felix," and I was like, "Oh right, of course, yeah." And then I just assumed you had moved here at some point, but that's not true.
It's not exactly true.
I mean, you're not still in school, are you? Or
no, I'm not.
No,
I'm
okay.
not. Yeah, I've been out of it for. I mean, that's a whole thing for me. School and me have kind of a strange relationship.
Tenuous relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's the kind of thing where I try to come here as much as I can, and I'm also really grateful that I get to go back to Montreal. And the more I move around, the more I appreciate that place as, my hometown and as a place for the arts and stuff. So I don't know. I think it's really interesting that they're so close together and that they're so easy to get to.
You just assume, Montreal, Canada, whatever. It's
cold.
It's cold. It's really far, and
Yeah.
it's like what? It's 6 hours.
Yeah,
on a
6
bus?
hours, 7 hours driving, 8 or 10 hours like this last trip was by bus.
You gotta take the train, man.
Yeah, but the train runs once a day.
Oh.
And it takes 13 hours.
What?
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
No, they got to figure something else out.
Well, I guess international, if it's not Europe,
Yeah, exactly.
going between the U.S. and other countries can be a hassle.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas, I mean, how far can you get in 6 hours in Europe on the train?
Oh,
You can get across several countries.
exactly.
That's something you do a lot as well. You're in Europe pretty frequently.
Yeah,
at least you have been over the past year or so.
Yes. Yeah, and that's pretty recent development. I mean, I never ever would have thought that I would go there as much as I've been, going up. Yeah, like you said, the last year and a half, and I don't know, man. I feel really lucky about that because it's always for some very interesting project, and I don't take that for granted. And usually, what I try to do is extend my trip a little bit, and usually something else comes out of that. But
Just playing wise, or like life experience wise, or
both.
Both.
I mean, because I guess most of my friends or the people that I know over there are musicians or involved in the arts somehow. So yeah, it's been interesting to see. Also, just personally, how I react to, running around all these different countries, and number one, the language thing becomes. I never thought about that here. For obvious reasons, English here is the thing, right? And you can go such huge distances and never have to think about that,
right?
And then as soon as you get anywhere over there, basically it becomes something that you have to think about.
You can go 2 hours in one direction and have to deal with a completely different way of different way of living, but a different way of communicating.
Yeah, a different way of communicating, living, whatever, and that's been really fun actually, and also just from working with other artists, it's it's fun. It used to be stressful for obvious reasons, But I like it a lot.
And not even just, I would say even like just musically, you could look at it. If we take a really narrow view of it, not artistically, just trombonistically, because you are also bass trombonist like me.
Yeah.
But in the U.S. and to some extent in Canada as well, you can go across the country. You can go from New York to LA.
Mm-hmm.
There are differences, but the kind of the style of American trombone playing has become so homogenized.
Right.
I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad for what it is. Of course not, because there's so many great trombonists. But
Right.
but it's very similar. New York to LA to Texas to to Chicago, whatever.
Yeah.
Because everyone's kind of come, But in a place like if you go between Vienna and Paris, it's two completely different musical histories, musical languages, both in classical and in jazz. Like it's completely different.
Yeah.
And not having been there myself, I kind of like covet something like that because I'm kind of tired of if I go to Atlanta, it's going to be the same kind of musical training, or not training, but just language as far as my own instrument goes.
Right. Well, it's in the name, right? It's the American way of playing, and that covers all that territory, and I guess you could even argue that there's a North American way of playing too.
Definitely for sure.
Yeah, because Canada's in there too, and all these, it's I know. I think about that a lot, and I it's funny because I haven't played in an orchestra in a long time, So these, when people talk about that, I kind of know what they mean, but not really, to be honest. Because
I'm trying to avoid it as much as I can, but sometimes I got to pay the bills with it.
Yeah, no, I love playing. I loved playing in orchestra. I mean, I would, it's one of those things where I can't really tell where I stopped playing in orchestras because it wasn't a conscious choice. It stopped happening, and other things kind of took that place in my life. But I know what you mean. But I was thinking about that on this last trip because, like you said, from Vienna to Paris, it's a completely different thing. And I was saying, okay, well, there's the American way of playing, but then within the within America, you have so many different kinds of cultures, and I think that's really cool. I mean, of course, if you're looking at the orchestral trombone sound, you're looking at a very specific kind of thing. So maybe it's easier to generalize, but I think it's really cool how crazy the States is. From one place to another. I think each state is its own little country. When you're comparing it to Europe, and people, often make that comparison. It's like, well, I don't know, how many countries could you go through in 12 hours if you were driving versus, and I think it's kind of, you can draw some similarities actually, just depending on how you want to look at it, and also traveling. For me, I haven't seen that much of the States, to be honest, and I'm really curious about the Midwest, for example. And
there's a lot of corn.
Yeah, right.
I lived there for 4 years,
Yeah.
and my family is originally from Chicago, so that's pretty well ingrained in my background. So there's a lot of cool stuff though.
Yeah.
Even once you get past the fact that if you go through Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, and to some extent Iowa, it all looks the same.
Right, okay.
Fly to those states. Don't drive through them.
All right, got it.
Fly to Cincinnati, then fly to Indianapolis, or drive to Indianapolis, then fly to Chicago. Don't do the drive. It's really boring.
Okay. All right.
You'll be falling asleep and you're like, just make the corn stop.
Right. So you came. So why'd you come here? Why'd you end up in New York?
Well, I started an undergrad degree at a little private liberal arts college in Indiana, northern Indiana, and I was there for a few years. And when I was a junior, they shut down their music department.
Okay,
they ran out of money or something.
Right. Okay.
I'd been studying with a great trombone teacher there who had been in the National Symphony for a long time, who I had known for a long time. And but when they shut it down, I was like, well, I can pretty much, even though they shut it, they made the decision so late that it was past all the deadlines for every school. This is 2010 and 2009, 2010, and I was like, well, I guess I can go pretty much anywhere.
Right.
I mean, most people are understanding if you explain the situation. So I was like, well, if I'm going to start over, I might as well go to New York.
Right.
And
Great. Yeah.
And I'd been a big, Dave Taylor guy, like since
Totally.
since I was like 13.
Right.
Like I'd heard him when I was 13. I was like, that's the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came to Matt. I was like, oh, well, I might as well get with the guy.
Get with the guy. Right? Yeah. No, totally.
So I mean, that's kind of like the reason I ended up here, just out of the South and the Midwest.
Right. Right.
So, well, since we're talking about backgrounds,
Yeah.
let's make that heavy-handed segue.
Sure.
You're from, you're born and raised in Canada.
Born and raised in Montreal.
In Montreal.
Yeah.
I mean, for people who don't know you, I mean, you kind of have to address the last name thing. Yes, you're related to David del Tredici.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
No, he doesn't send you checks every week.
No.
It's
No. Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, David is my uncle. David is, for those who don't know, he's a Pulitzer Prize-winning composer, and he's been, for background, yeah, I'm from Montreal. My mom is from Nagasaki, Japan, and my dad and his side of the family is from California.
Okay.
San Anselmo. And
then they just moved to Canada?
yeah, I mean, well, what happened was that, my dad, Bobby, he started documenting. He's a photographer,
okay,
a visual artist photographer, and he got a gig basically documenting. He calls it documenting the nuclear age. He went. So, I mean, he came up with this idea that he wanted to document the process of making an atomic bomb. And wanted, it wasn't supposed to be anything that was pro or anti-nuclear. He just wanted to say, this is what's happening. Because
this is just like an objective look at, this is the process.
Yeah, because, it's like how it's made.
Right.
And so he went to, so when you make an atomic bomb, I'm going to get to the origin. When you make an atomic bomb, there are several different factories in the States that the completed product has to go through.
Right.
They don't make it all in one location. And so Bobby basically drove across the United States a couple times in his car, just walking in and taking photos of the place. I mean, it was a legitimate operation. He wasn't just doing it, but I mean, he had a grant. He was supported by the government. And he came out with this book. And part of it was called At Work in the Fields of the Bomb, and part of the project was going over to Japan to interview the survivors of
Nagasaki,
Hiroshima, and my mom was his translator. And there's a great shot that he took of her where she's standing in this nice dress next to these basically human organs that are preserved, and they're studying them because they're basically got very messed up by the bomb,
right?
Just to put it simply. And it's kind of a funny picture of my mom before they hooked up, before anything. And he got a job teaching in Alberta, and he was one of the first guys to create an interdisciplinary program at a university in Canada. And he wanted to basically, say, here's photography, here's a visual medium, how can we mix and match it with all this other stuff? And I mean, that's a pretty standard thing these days. I mean, look at New School, look how it's designed.
It's all, they're pushing towards everything being interdisciplinary.
Yeah, exactly. And just the way it's laid out in the city. I mean, you walk past all the different campuses, and so Bobby was one of the first guys to kind of push for that, and then he got a job teaching in Montreal, and then I happened,
and then you happened. So, I mean, what was your musical upbringing like? I mean, this is when you have a father or who's like artistically driven. whether or not you end up doing that, I mean, that generally is a huge influence on whatever art form you choose, because because a lot of what you do is very, I don't want to call it high art. It implies something a little less accessible, but I wouldn't want to say that about your music.
No, but I know what you mean. I know.
Because that kind of thing can very deeply shape what kind of artistic direction you end up going in.
Yeah. I would say that my dad has been next to Dave Taylor, probably the biggest influence on me, just in terms of well, like you said, I mean, it's hard to kind of define. I mean, sometimes that term art music gets thrown around a lot, and I don't know about that. I mean, I'm just letting other people kind of tell me what they think it is, because anyways, musical upbringing, I didn't really do any kind of music until I got to high school. I mean, I didn't take piano lessons when I was a kid or anything, because my dad's not a musician, my mom is not a musician, and I didn't really have a relationship with my Uncle David at that point. He was still kind of like the crazy composer doing all this,
the weird guy on the East Coast, he does this music stuff. I mean,
writing music about cool. your dick and stuff. And
why not?
Yeah, exactly. But as a kid, you're just like looking at that, and there's no context for it, growing up. But and then in high school I picked up the trombone, and I kind of just went with it. And I mean, it's not a very romantic story, but it's the truth.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Like sometimes it's just a matter of one day I was given a trombone, or whatever.
But what I'm realizing looking back is that I think I was really lucky to have. I mean, like all of us, man, amazing teachers. Mm-hmm. And especially in Montreal, we have a lot of really, not just amazing players, but interesting players that do all kinds of stuff, and that are, I think, good role models for just kind of making a living as a trombone player in this day and age. And I mean, of course, if you don't necessarily want to go down an orchestral path, you got to freelance. You got to find where you fit into all that stuff. And there are so many guys doing that in Montreal that teach in the different universities. That I mean, so when you're playing trombone and you're surrounded by people like that, it's interesting, because they're kind of setting the stage for you. They're saying, like, it is possible to do a bunch of stuff, and it's okay to do a bunch of stuff and not know exactly all the time what your prime objective is.
Right.
It's okay to search a little bit. So when I look back at that was really helpful, because I think that's how I am just in general, is I'm flip-flopping all the time and running back and forth, and I have trouble sticking with, my own philosophies and ideas for, an extended period of time. But I think I hope that's okay.
Right. I mean, that's okay. And I mean, there is an age component to that.
That's right.
I mean, you and I are roughly the same age. We're both around 26.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's not really a hurry to if you're doing a lot of different stuff, there's not, at a younger age, there's not anymore. There's not such a hurry. I mean, people come all the time. People are finishing their grad degrees. People are moving back with their parents because they had that. They're 6 years of they're $120,000 in debt or more, $160,000 in debt, and have no idea what they want to do with their lives. But they have 2 degrees.
Yeah, exactly. But man, that was something I had to really think about, because you're right. The age thing can be a big downer. Like I hate that thing about. I mean, I don't know where it came from. Maybe I'm just making up that thing about being 30.
Yeah.
And having to have something, quote unquote, like figured out. Just I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard thing to think. Because you look around. in a place like New York, you look around the city, and of course, might be a little bit skewed because of just the sheer amount of people. But if I look at trombonists, just specifically trombonists in the city who are doing things that I want to do, most of them are in their mid to late 30s. Like,
right. Yeah,
I mean, and it took them a long time to get there. And like, it's comforting in a way, but at the same time, it's like, because you still see those kids who are coming out of a bachelor's and getting a show or doing Radio City or doing whatever, just for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But like for the most part, you've got these people, so it's comforting, but also discouraging in the way that it's a long time to go. I've got a long way to go.
Yeah, and that's why I'm really grateful for the community here. I mean, like all I mean, all those guys that are. I mean, Whitwell is one of my best friends,
right?
You know, and Will, man, I respect him. You know,
Will Lang.
Will Lang. Yeah. I mean, I met him in Germany. Actually, that was the first time I met him in these new music courses in Darmstadt. And I was studying with Mike Svoboda. And Will kind of just came in. He was playing with an ensemble over there and played for us, you know, in our master classes. And I think that was the first time I met someone who was doing the thing, you know, who was in kind of like our age category. You know, who had such a clear vision of what he wanted to do, what he believed in, and he was going for it. And I remember that really gave me a huge boost, you know, to see someone doing that. And when I came back from that trip, you know, that was kind of a mind-blowing experience. I don't know if you know about these courses over there. They're Darmstadt's this city in Germany,
right? And
it was a festival that got started by Pierre Boulez and Stockhausen, basically for composers. And I'm definitely getting some details wrong because I don't know all the history. But since it began, it's become kind of this huge event every 2 years in the summer, and all the best new music ensembles come there. All the best, you know, teachers for composition and instrumentalists go over there, and it's just it's 2 weeks of this very intense kind of I don't know, man. You go in and you can't come out of it without just kind of having your view on music, on yourself, on the world change. I mean maybe that's an exaggeration, but that's definitely how I felt.
Intense structure plus new music proponents are generally pretty intense as people because you know the discipline and the dedication that's required to really go for that kind of a thing. And it was just such a. I mean, okay, so you want to talk about the kind of, you know, how hard it is to identify, you know, what kind of music like these guys play or what I do, or I mean, over there it was whatever it is that I'm doing now. I think it started with that experience because I met a bass player named Catherine Schulmeister. And we were playing in this orchestra program together, playing, you know, the regular stuff, Bruckner and Mahler. And she asked me if I wanted to play a piece by Christian Wolff. And I had no idea who this guy was. And I had no idea what the music was like, but, you know, of course, let's just do it. And that, I remember that moment. That was such a clear moment in my mind, because that was the window, that was the door into, you know, just basically a new sound world. We'll put it like that. And
and she said, you should come to these courses. And that was the start of all this new music, of all this avant-garde stuff, and
experimentation.
Yeah, experimenting with yourself, experimenting with how you deal with a guy who wants to write music for you but has no idea how your instrument works. And yeah, I mean, so I've been doing that for a while, and I have to be honest that in the last, I don't know, in the last year I've been kind of lost in that respect, because to fill out more of the gap, I went to McGill University,
right,
and I did the orchestral program there, and I had a hard time, and I left school for a little bit, and that was when I started studying with Taylor, and I was getting really confused over there, because I knew that all this other stuff was happening. I could see guys, just pursuing their vision of just how they wanted to do things, what they believed music was, there's the power of music, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It's a pretty nebulous,
exactly.
term.
So you have to kind of boil it down into something that,
something tangible,
and
accessible.
Yeah, and also that fuels you.
Yeah.
That fuels you to get up and just, work on your thing so that you can get your message across.
Right.
And I was so messed up at McGill because I wasn't, and that was probably also my own fault. Just being young, just kind of whatever. But all I knew was that Dave was giving me that kind of direction, or at least encouraging me to just open my mind. And so when I was done, in the middle of that, I had gone to Darmstadt, and then when I was done, I went to Basel, Switzerland,
right,
and to study with the guy, Mike Swoboda, and I had a hard time over there, man. It was kind of little parts of financial difficulties. I totally underestimated how expensive Switzerland was, and if I was going to do it again, I would, apply for a Fulbright or whatever. But this is the kind of thing where I'm just not in that zone. I'm not thinking about those kinds of things, and I should. And I think since I went over there and came back, I've been having a bit of trouble figuring out, where I was talking to Dave about this with him yesterday, and there's art music, there's the avant-garde, and then when you look into those, there's the smaller things like new complexity, minimalism, all this uptown,
right,
down, like all this stuff that people throw
so
around.
Fragmented into these little camps.
And honestly, I don't know what's going on anymore with me in relation to that, because I used to want to be like the guy who would commission all these composers and be right there with all these extended techniques and showing a new side of the trombone or whatever.
Right.
And I think lately I've just been wondering, well, how does that, it's a hard question to ask, but how does that help people? How does that, because if I'm not doing it for myself, which is how it feels, then who am I doing it for? Because if you are doing something that you don't necessarily believe in, then what's going on?
Like why do it at all?
Yeah, and that's something I've been having a bit of trouble with lately, and the guy that kind of pulled me out of that helped me a lot is a composer named Sandeep Bhagwati. And he is a German Indian composer who moved to Montreal almost 10 years ago. And he started a research lab called MatraLab and collected a bunch of different artists, musicians, with the intention of just researching, interdisciplinary art, with the intention of just having this center in Montreal where it was a safe place to just ask a lot of questions and, have the opportunities to research. To have a place where you could go in with these questions like so you're doing all this music and how does it help people and how can it help people? And what does that even mean? There's a, like you were saying before, this nebulous kind of feeling to a lot of it where it's kind of up in the air and you don't know where it belongs and Sandeep, I think he kind of saved my life, to be honest. And the way I met him was we were doing a Chinese opera together that he was writing. And I loved how he would, he would take the question about, playing new music, playing something like Barrio.
Right.
And I don't know. I guess there's a side of the community where Barrio is like the start of the modern classical trombone repertoire.
It's probably the one piece with extended technique, or extended techniques that everyone tries to perform at least, even if they don't do anything else with new music ever.
Right, exactly. It's kind of made its way into the standard thing. And I don't know. I've played that piece a lot, and I've worked it up, and I remember reading Dave's article that he wrote for the ITA.
Right. I remember that.
Yeah, it's called Risk, and he talks about the Barrio Sequenza specifically in there, and he says, this piece is about a clown. It's about Grok. And do you think that Grok, who would entertain kings and queens and peasants and just the whole spectrum of people, do you think he would really care if he went up there and missed the first note? Do you think he would care, if it wasn't exactly timed right or what? It's like, no, he wants to entertain. And of course, that's one very extreme way of looking at it. And then there's the other side, which is very precise. Like when I went to study with Mike and work on the sequenza with him, I was amazed at his approach, just very precise, every single note was in the right place and had, there were all the reasons to do that, and it sounds obvious, but it's kind of interesting to me how you can have these two completely different approaches to the same huge piece. On one side you have this almost theatrical element, which is, it's just a trombone. Yeah. And you just got to come out and play something. Play something high, just get the people's attention. And then there's the other side where it's saying, no, but this is the piece that you can and should study as this kind of milestone for us, for the trombone community. And so you should take it very seriously. And just getting back to Sandeep, I thought Sandeep kind of was a bridge between those two worlds. It's kind of,
those are two, those kind of, they might be, are they two sides of the same coin? Not really, but it's a pretty big divide between that. And, if you have people pulling you in both directions, what do you do with that? You have
it can cause a lot of turmoil, especially if you're switching back and forth between those two, like fairly regularly.
Right.
Like you're in this situation where no, it's all precision. You're this one. It can it can really mess you up.
Yeah.
Because this is your life. I mean, this is your career. Like this is what you're supposed to be using to support yourself going forward. Like,
yeah, exactly.
How do you bridge that?
Yeah.
Without, either, I don't know, selling your soul sounds a bit intense, but like, abandoning something that you hold, very strongly, or
right.
As opposed to like going with this guy or this guy. It's a hard. Anyway, Sandeep was that bridge for you.
Sandeep was definitely that bridge for me, and I hung on to him for dear life, man. Mm-hmm. And that relationship has and continues to be one of the most enriching things in my life. I mean, we just went to Berlin together, and we were playing at a conference at the House of World Cultures.
And this is what you were doing last month, right?
Yeah, this is what I was doing last month. And
or this month. It's still October.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man.
It's not November yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, still this month. But Sandeep kind of pulled me onto this project he had been doing called Native Alien. And it's a piece that he wrote for for soloist. Mm-hmm. It ended up being, a trombone piece. But the initial thing was a research project that would take 4 years for a soloist and what he calls a compromising computer environment. And what that means is you have a computer that listens to you play, improvise, talk. And the initial research question is, can you make a system that learns how you play and then contributes something that you can really work with, that you can actually make a piece with? Because, of course, a computer that plays with you is not a new thing.
Right.
But a computer that learns, that works with you, maybe that's a new thing. I mean, I know there are a lot of guys moving in that direction. But, that's... everybody's got to do their part. And,
right.
And this was his, his share of it. And basically, he took on a student named Navid Nawab who would help design the computer system. Mm-hmm. And there's all this technical stuff that I have no clue about. But what I like is that the premise is that the computer has 8 different ways that it can react to the soloist.
Right.
And the 8, max patches or the 8 different ways that it reacts are based on these Indian rasas. And this philosophy it's a philosophy that in art, there are all these different human emotions that kind of float in and out of each other. Mm. And it's like love, eroticism, anger, fury, compassion. It floats through these different things constantly. I mean, we're always doing that in our life, just going in between emotions. And that was kind of the basis of this piece, is that the computer is going to do that. And you play in that context, that you're playing to something that is moving through different emotions constantly. And what it ends up sounding like is that the love emotion, the love program is something that on a technical level, it finds what pitch you're playing. And then it tries to follow you as you move through those pitches.
Right.
And so when we would work on this piece together, I would try to play something and move very slowly and feel how the computer would move with me. And it's not even, okay, that's fine, but what is love actually like? What are relationships actually like? Stuff gets interesting when there's conflict.
Yeah.
And there will be conflict, so do that to the computer. It's not about, moving in parallel motion all the time. It's about hitting someone with something and seeing how they react.
Right.
And you can do that for every emotion. If the computer is in fury mode, which is a very kind of, it draws on sounds that are kind of horrifying and, just evoke images of, violence, basically. What if you play like you're in love?
Yeah.
And the computer is in a totally different world. And how do you make something happen with that? And we've been doing that for almost 3 years now. And I don't know how I got into that project, but that brings so many questions with it about improvising, playing trombone, and how you play trombone in relation to this thing, and
life,
your own stuff. And I think I've grown a lot working with him, especially on that project.
Yeah.
And we brought it to Berlin.
Now,
and,
had you done this? You've been working on it for 3 years.
Yeah.
What's the live performance quality like?
Live performance, yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming you've done it, but you did it before you took it over. To
Yeah.
a
We've
bunch
done a lot,
of times.
yeah.
But how does how does an audience react to something like that?
It's been kind of all over the map, to be honest. I mean, because of course you can't sit down and explain this to people.
Yeah.
You can't say, okay, what you're going to, I mean, of course you can, and we've done that before, but still, we did it a couple times. At these different conferences where it's literally that, where you sit down and you have slides and you explain what's going on.
Right.
And then people listen to the piece, and most of the time, I have to be honest, they come up afterward and say, it sounded great, but I didn't hear the love. I didn't hear the disgust emotion. I didn't understand how they related to each other. And I say, that's all right, because I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't even know what the computer or what Navid is really doing, because there's a lot of layers to it, and because it remembers stuff. It's not always living with you in the present moment. It's going to draw. I mean, the nature of the project itself is that they built up this sound library, starting with people who had been working on the project from the very beginning. So the sounds that come out of the computer aren't artificial. They're 4 years of research coming back at your face. And so unfortunately that also meant that the guys who were early on in the project, like Mike Swoboda was one of the first guys, or the first guy, and all his sounds were artificially made, MIDI, these kinds of things. So, he told me it kind of sounded like old Star Trek, the sounds like beep, boop, boop, and people have all kinds of reactions, because it's just, just on one level, like the sound world it's not trombone stuff. I'm screaming. I'm doing all kinds of sounds that are maybe difficult to listen to, anyways.
Yeah.
But that's also fun to see. Like, I love seeing the reactions of people, because it's also about expectation. It's like if I told you, okay, now I'm going to play, and the computer is in a love emotion or in a love mood, you're going to have, naturally a certain amount of expectation of what you might hear, because you have your own concept of love. Right? And you have your own concept of anger. And one of the most interesting comments I get is that, well, no, that's not what I think love sounds like.
It's like, well, that's, you're not the one doing it.
Yeah, you're not the one doing it. And also, that's the whole kind of thing, is that there are so many definitions to these emotions.
I mean, in every, if there's eight specific, eight specific emotional categories, if you will. Sure, the computer has 8 settings. Settings is a pretty
No.
Anyway, but as human performer, you can take those 8 settings, and spin them in literally thousands of ways, because each of them has so many separate facets.
Yeah, exactly.
And it can turn into anything.
Yeah.
So I was just curious. I mean, you're talking a little bit about like the actual your actual practice in performing this specific piece. But I'd like to kind of split it off into something a little bit broader.
Yeah.
You're talking about like doing things with your instrument that aren't necessarily playing it.
Sure.
I mean, you're screaming. You're making just a wide variety of sounds. I remember before I even met you, because I'm also good friends with Dave Whitwell. He would tell me sometimes about like the different kind of things you're experimenting with.
Yeah.
Just sound wise, just kind of different sound concepts.
Yeah.
Or what you can play, how you can play with it. Now, I say all that to kind of say you even just mentioned that like some of these things are difficult to listen to.
Right.
Which when things are difficult to listen to, sometimes you're just like,
exactly,
not feeling it.
Right.
While I'm trying to put into words what I'm.
Yeah.
Like when you're dealing with things that are difficult to listen to, and you're admitting that that's not the easiest thing to approach.
Sure. Yeah.
Like how do you go about like presenting that? You're coming to them with this thing, and you're saying that like, well, you might, it's okay if you don't necessarily understand.
Yeah.
What?
How do I?
How do you process this kind of thing? I mean, like, why?
Yeah.
Or even just why?
Why? Yeah. Exactly.
Why do that?
Yeah.
Why give someone something that they just might fucking hate?
Yeah. Exactly.
Well,
I mean,
I'm just from a curious point of view.
Absolutely. Well, I guess there's also a thing about that. Thing about being difficult to listen to. I mean, it's a pretty wide world we're talking about, because I mean, a lot of things are difficult to listen to, and something I had to deal with, just in. I mean, I guess everybody has to deal with this at a certain point, but just that, our concept of what is difficult or what is beautiful is it's really influenced by where we come from, the music that we grew up listening to, and then depending on what you get exposed to, that your definitions of those things change. It's a natural. I mean, that happens with everything. I mean, that's just part of growing up. It's an obvious thing, but once you start getting into new music, into the avant-garde, that seems to be like another plateau that gets harder for people to kind of get into. And you can go back to, for me, the Christian Wolf event, with Catherine, the bass player. That he's kind of coming from this philosophy of John Cage, and the Fluxus movement, and these kind of things that help change your perception or of what you are taking in and how you deal with that. And it's also a challenge for yourself to go deeper into your own definitions of those things. And so what do I find beautiful, and why do I find it beautiful? And is maybe beautiful the wrong way to look at it, because that already means that you're putting it into a category that's very difficult to get out of. And same thing with saying something is difficult. I don't think it's my responsibility to make the audience listen to something and try to get it, or try to do whatever, because how can I expect, the audience to do that much processing in the moment? Because just for myself personally, I when I go to see something and I don't understand at all what's happening, I mean, I still have trouble with modern art, and I can't tell you why I have trouble with it, but I just know that I do have trouble with it. But I just take it in, and one of the things I don't like so much is when someone is telling me what to think, or telling me how to feel, because I think it's a process that takes a long time. And
this is important. You should feel this way about it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's all right if someone says this is important.
Yeah,
that's fine. But okay, I mean, for me, one of the things that kind of changed the way I think about music, about sound, about visual arts, about just walking through the world was there is this teacher that came to Montreal a while ago named Julian Klein, and he's a experimental theater director in Berlin. And he came and did a kind of workshop in Montreal about improvising. And he was working with musicians as a theater director. And I'm going to get back to the difficult part in a second, but he was saying, so basically it was a workshop, how do you approach improvisation? How do you approach just starting something out of nothing and dealing with it, and just saying, okay, this is happening, and I've started something, I've started the boulder going down the hill, and I have to make the best of it until it gets to the bottom. And that's a difficult thing, because I have been afraid of improvising for so long, because my concept of it was coming from a jazz point of view. Mm-hmm. And not even jazz, but just where the people I was surrounded with at McGill, for example, just to say from a school point of view, it was like post bebop or this kind of thing, and I have no idea
what that even means.
Yeah, what that even means, or even how to get into it.
Yeah,
So for me, improvisation, that word, that is scary.
Yeah.
That is difficult.
It's a weird thing, because when you're coming at it from a jazz perspective, you're improvising, but there's still a very rigid set of rules that frame. All of these fit into, like whether post bebop,
modern jazz,
there's so many different things, and they all have their very specific things. And that's just a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you do it wrong, well, oh no, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I don't mean to step on anyone's toes or anything, because I know that it's like you put,
and it's great. I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
To be fair, I love it, but it's still that kind of and the point I was making is so when you say the word improvisation, in my mind as well, that's the first thing that cues up, and it's because I don't have all my blues scales memorized.
No,
I just don't.
But I had to think about this a lot, because when you're asking about sounds that are difficult to listen to, and think it's where I'm coming from. That's how I thought about improvisation, which is crazy when you think about it, because that's such a specific way of thinking about it. And the fact is that we improvise all the time, man. We're improvising right now.
Yeah.
We're improvising when we're walking down the street, all this stuff. It's just that we tune it out. And I think part of the challenge of anything, if you want to talk about a new music audience, if you want to talk about getting in front of an audience and screaming into your trombone and just putting that out there and seeing how people react. I don't know. You have to kind of, the way I've been thinking about it lately is that, we're doing this all the time, and we just kind of fade things in and out, and certain things take the spotlight more than others. And, if you want to get up and you want to play something that's going to be difficult to listen to, you have to just do it 100%. And and know that people are in their own, I don't know how to say this, but everyone has their own journey in terms of coming to these sounds, and hopefully at a certain point they don't become just sounds anymore. Yeah, I don't know, man. But sorry, getting back to the Julian Klein thing before I go on too many segues. So he was working with the musicians and giving us different exercises to kind of slowly open up, our idea of what improvisation can be, and he had a couple different principles that he wanted to lay out, and the first one was amplification. Okay, and I love this exercise, man. He had us lying in a circle. There were like eight of us, so we would lie in a circle, and he said, "Okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to amplify what you hear in the room." And we were in a room like this, very isolated from the outside world. So we would lie down, and you say, "Close your eyes and just go." Amplify it with your body, your mouth, whatever. So we'd lie down, and it would be really quiet for a long time, and eventually someone would go like, boop, because maybe they heard something, and then that would trigger the thing, and then people would get out of their shell and start going crazy, because you kind of like opened the faucet, and then all this stuff came out. Yeah. I said, okay, cool, that's cool. It's good that you guys got that out of your system, but it's not amplifying. And the more we did this, the deeper it got, because it went from first of all being shy, completely shy, and being so self-conscious about your voice to begin with, your body, and there was all this judgment about what you could do or couldn't do. And that's something that I think we all know about. Just you're afraid to kind of just put something out there, and there's the fear that it might not be cool enough, or it might not be exactly what fits. But the fact is, it doesn't really matter. It's just if it's something that you really feel you want to put out there, just do it, and then let other people deal with it. And so for the amplifying thing, he said, try to be a microphone. Try to be a microphone. Because a microphone doesn't judge what it hears. Yeah. It just amplifies. And what you can change is the sensitivity of the microphone. So, okay, that makes a bit of sense. And so we did this, and it's like all of a sudden you tune into things like the sound of the air ventilator. And then the sound that the air ventilator makes, because there's like a little piece of plastic that's moving. And it was like every time we did this, our microscope got better, or we were able to zoom in further to different sounds. And that, for me, that was really difficult, because it's the kind of thing where you're looking at something, or you're walking down the street and there's all this stuff happening, but you're so focused on your goal, you're so focused on your destination that you can't take in anything else. But certain things happen that make you notice other details. And that was where this workshop kind of took us was, how do you, in your everyday life, take in more than you are currently?
Right.
And how do you become aware of your surroundings in a way that, I mean, you can just sit and just, basically go back to being a kid, go back to being amazed at the way the world is, and just being amazed at, that there's all these lines intersecting with each other, and every single color possible is just interacting with every shape possible. I mean, and New York is amazing for that, man.
Yeah.
And he sent out this paper that he had written, said, this is good. I would recommend that you read this. And it's his kind of attempt to put this into writing. And I love this, man. He begins by saying, imagine you're at a theater production or, a music production, whatever. You're just going to see something, and you go to the dress rehearsal, and it's fucking chaos. Everyone's running around. People are spilling things. People are reciting their lines like last minute, or like warming up or doing whatever. And then finally the stage gets cleared and it begins. And then they run through it. Shakespeare, Mozart Requiem, whatever. And then you go to see the actual concert, and it's the same thing. People running around, chaos. So what's different? What's changed? The only thing that's changed is your perception of it.
Right.
The only thing that's changed is that you have a piece of paper in your hand that's explaining what's going on. That you paid $20 to get in. So your mind is prepared. It's prepped. And there's also the element of the stage. The stage gives someone that expectation that you're sitting there. It's always that you sit in the chair and you're facing the stage. So whatever comes onto that stage, naturally deserves your attention.
Yeah, and you were in some way ready for it.
Yeah, you're ready
the
for
decision to be there.
Yeah, exactly. So you're ready for it, and but all the world's a stage, man. And it just blew my mind. This concept that he put forth about the way that we move through it. I mean, because you can always say that it's like, you gotta pay attention to different things, or you can sit and look at a wall and notice the different patterns. But how do you actually explain this to someone? How do you say it in a way that you're not just rambling?
Yeah.
And the way that he put it was so simple. It was basically, imagine that there's a spectrum of presence that we move through. Okay, so we all know about being present in the moment and what that kind of means. So imagine on the left side of this line, let's say there's the present, the mere present.
Yeah.
And that's just a general awareness of what's going on. It's kind of warm in here, or the wind is blowing, the light's on, we're in this kind of whitish room. And then you move to the next thing, and it's presence. And that's when you start kind of noticing like the color of the wall, or how, like, what material things are made of, or what kind of carpet, or the pattern on the carpet. And these things are outside of the frame. So these are things that people notice all the time, but they're not necessarily coming into the tools that you would use. Because otherwise it would just be too much. I mean, you can't notice.
So you can't notice everything.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. And then when you keep moving, then you go into the framework. And the first thing about that is presentation. So you go from the present moment to presence, to presentation. And that's when you say, look at the design of this microphone, man. I mean, look at the design of this music stand.
Right.
It's, you know, it's when you take it and you say, check this out. Mm-hmm. Someone had to design this. Someone had to lay out, you know, the street plan here. Someone had to design everything that we're looking at. Someone had to think about it. And now let's look at it and give it the time of day it deserves. You know, let's stop on the street corner and look at that wall. Let's look at it and see what we can find in it. What, you know, and the most basic way of doing this is just looking up, looking at the sky. You know, and people do that all the time. Say, like, what do you see in the clouds? What do you see? What kind of shapes come out to you? And what I love about that is that there's no right or wrong.
Right.
You know, it's just, what do you see? What are you taking in, and what can you share with me that I haven't seen in this? You know, we're looking at the same thing, and what do you see, or what do you hear in this? You know.
So I guess I think what I'm hearing you say is that when you know, it seems to me at least, you're kind of like taking these processes and going through them yourself.
Yeah.
And then you get to this presentation stage that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And at that point, you can take this process that you've gone through.
Yeah.
And boil down and take in your opinions, your findings, if you will. Yeah. And then you can bring them and start the process.
Yeah.
For someone else.
Exactly.
I mean, because and that it's a thing, like, everyone's not going to see everything. Like,
of course,
you know, sometimes it just takes someone to, like, push you down that road a little bit. Yeah. And then you'll be like, oh, right, you're right. This wall is cool. And I'll probably find something, or, you know, whatever. I'll find something different, you know, by going down a path that diverges from yours at some point. Yeah, self-branding. What up?
But you know, the yeah, absolutely. And just to, you know, to wrap that part of it up, is that there's the presentation part of it, and then the last step in that is representation. And that's what a lot of people are doing, that you go up and, like, if you're an actor, you represent a character. That something embodies something else that doesn't have to be there in the moment. I mean, a cross represents this whole thing.
Millennia of...
You know, this whole thing. And it's just kind of, that's when things start to get really interesting, is that you can say, you know, this, you know, symbolism. You know, that's where it comes in, because the thing that you want to represent doesn't have to be in the room with you in order for people to get it. Right. So actors are always doing that. And so, yeah, honestly, that's what I've been really interested in the last, you know, long while, man, is that's why I you know, just to go back a little bit about talking about my relationship to new music, to all this stuff, I'm getting a little bit confused, because I kind of having my mind blown, just, you know, sitting and observing how things go, even, and it's kind of getting into, you know, you know, sometimes I'll be sitting in rehearsal or something, and just noticing how people are acting towards each other, and I'm so amazed, you know, and I think part of the problem I'm having is kind of getting back into the music from that point, because then when you're doing the music, it's like you're doing this very specific thing, like you have to execute, you know, what's on the page, that you do have this framework within a frame, like you have the notes on the page, you know, and you have to represent the music, and I think that yeah, it's overwhelming no matter what you do, And one of the things that I like a lot is when you go to a concert and everyone is like really focused on the music,
Yeah.
and then someone fucking coughs or starts opening like a candy wrapper. You know how much tension there is in the room? You know how crazy people get?
Yeah.
And that's amazing to me.
That shift happens so fast.
That shift happens so fast, and I'm trying to figure out, where that or how I relate to that, where music relates to that, because that's in a totally different realm for me. That you can have someone observing that kind of phenomena or that kind of thing that's going on. That if you wanted to, you are totally in control of what you take in. Mm-hmm. That if you go to see the New York Phil and you go to see them play Mahler 3,
you know exactly.
But I mean, it's totally, it's your own choice what you come away with,
Yeah.
And we do that all the time, that if you're a trombone player, and you're going to go see that, the point is on Joe, when he's going to do the solo.
His thing.
but I just love that idea that it's like, okay, so here's an opportunity where everyone is focusing on the same thing, and what can you do to mess them up? Mm-hmm. What can you, and they won't even know if it's part of the thing or not. They're going to assume it's not, but that's kind of what I've been thinking about a lot lately is, maybe an equivalent as that you have a path that you have to take to get from here, point A to point B. And your way. And stuff happens all the time and you just move around it, or you jaywalk and like there's like lines intersecting, man, coming at you. You're just this point and there's these lines coming at you and you got to move in and out of them just to get from here to there. And what can we do as artists, as musicians, to break people out of that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, we all do this. It's not a thing, but it's just that looking at your phone, doing it. And I know that a lot of people are thinking about this because it's a new kind of problem, that we have this window, that's, as big as your hand. Yeah. It's like an abyss. You just stare into it and it sucks the life out of you.
Right.
But that's the world that we live in. And I guess that's what I mean by I'm missing the context. I'm missing like the reason for doing this, because it's such a shock when you get pulled out of that.
Yeah.
When you see things and you realize that there's too much stuff to navigate through. But that's refreshing, and that's kind of what I think people want in a way. They want to be pulled out of their funk, out of their, they want to wake up. And but the thing is, we don't even know that we're absorbed in this new kind of world, that we're so absorbed by our technology, by our stress, by all this stuff. And that's why I've just been thinking, okay, so this is my tool. The trombone is my tool. New music is a tool. Early music is a tool. Noise is a tool. And maybe what I want to do is I want to see how can we have those kinds of extreme, points of tension where people can come up with their own conclusion as to how they, or not, I'm saying the wrong way, but how can you do something so that people see the world differently?
Pull them out of the abyss.
Yeah, pull them out of like the abyss of the smartphone, of the internet, of this kind of very easy way out.
Yeah, because you can get it's so easy to not confront. Well, and part of it, when it comes down, the world's kind of shit.
That's the other thing.
right? And it's so easy to, well, I don't have to deal with it. I can, let me see, I can take out my iPad and
Yeah.
and immediately pull up fucking basketball.
Yeah.
Done.
I mean,
like,
it's
I have basketball right at my fingertips. I don't have to confront the fact that children are, whatever world issue you want.
Yeah. And eventually I guess everyone has to deal with that reality, that we're very privileged, to even be dealing with these kinds of questions, to even, we have so much stuff,
Sure. It's, of course, it would be crazy to say that we're not privileged.
Right.
But I don't know. And this problem comes with that privilege, but it's trying to like recapture that idea of just like being awake.
Yeah, exactly.
And using music to like poke through that.
Yeah.
I think I want to use like something that that you've performed, that I've heard you perform.
Yeah.
And you're recording it. You'll be recording it tomorrow.
Yes.
Tomorrow.
What are you talking about? The
mission accomplished.
Oh, yeah.
With,
yeah.
At least Marie told me that you were doing all the solo recordings tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this piece, I'm just curious about like how. Okay, this piece is called Mission Accomplished.
Yeah.
You draw from. I mean, it's pretty obvious where it comes from, but you draw from George W. Bush's 2003 speech.
Yeah. When
he landed on the Abraham Lincoln and basically said, "Iraq's over,"
yeah.
and then it went on for another 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, whatever, however long, another decade.
Yeah.
And this one's interesting for me, because first of all, I come from a predominantly military family.
Okay. Right.
Both my parents were in the Navy, and all the relatives that come with that. I was in the Navy.
Okay.
For several years, and when I enlisted, which was 2008.
Really?
Well, I mean, who was my commander in chief?
Right.
It was George W. Bush. So like this is an interesting thing for me. I was, even though I was only 13 when this event that you're referring to in your piece happened, because of my living situation, my growing up culture, I was very aware of it.
Yeah,
like
right.
I knew, I saw it, I remembered it, I remembered the newspapers that day and all this stuff.
Oh,
so it's very, it was very, that kind of thing was very present in my household because my dad didn't retire until 12, 13, something like that. So like all this stuff was very present. So when I hear a piece like that, and I mean, I don't think it'd be a stretch to say that the way you perform it does not cast the best light on our not so beloved former president.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
You could say that, and I'm not taking issue with that. I'm just saying that there's an interesting struggle,
right,
for me, because you generally don't go hear a piece perform that's like about your former boss.
Right. That's a good point. That's a. Right.
But I mean, like, so anyway, that's how I'm kind of approaching it. Okay. So it's a very interesting thing for me. I'm just curious about, like how you're kind of these concepts that we've been talking about, just to place them in a context of a very specific piece, a very specific piece.
Yeah. Well,
but in a relatively efficient fashion, because we have to wrap it up pretty soon.
Sure. Well, I would say, okay, the first thing is that it's always improvised. So that's drawing from my own journey through improvisation that is still going on, and it's just at the point where I feel comfortable having a little bit of a framework and then just dealing with how I feel in the moment and also with the audience reaction and stuff like that. But it's really interesting to hear you talk about it in that way, because
I've been waiting to talk to you about it for a while, because
that's really amazing. And I guess going back to my dad with his bomb project, I'm not deliberately trying to paint it in a negative or positive or neutral way. It's just, I think that here we have something where you can just look at it in writing and say, wow, this guy just stood up and said all this stuff. And it's like, what happened? I mean, what he said is fine. It's a political thing. It's an inspiring speech, but it's just about what happened afterwards.
Yeah.
And what still continues, like we're going to feel that forever, man.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, basically all those events changed the world and changed the course of history. And I don't know how to react to that. When you watch the video of him walking up to the podium and Mission Accomplishes in the background and hearing him and then knowing that there was another whole chapter to that. And what I'm just trying to put across with that is that there's always the other side, that especially in politics, someone is lying.
Yeah.
Someone, even if they're sort of telling the truth, that there are so many agendas that none of us can understand. But
yeah,
I don't know.
I was reading an essay. I mean, this essay is several years. It's a good 8 years old now. By the author Chuck Klosterman.
Okay. Yeah.
Big fan of him. He's one of my favorites. But he was addressing this specific issue of like politicians, and this is kind of just like a side thing to everything we're talking about.
Yeah.
But like we accept, like the public accepts when they see a politician speak.
Yeah.
That on some level they're lying, and there might be a variety of reasons for that, but somehow we've made ourselves be okay with that,
right.
Because that's just how the game is played. And when the example he used was when you're confronted with someone like he used this specific example of Ralph Nader, who doesn't speak ironically. He says exactly what he thinks,
right.
As opposed to coloring it with all these things to try and grab people. The American people, like, or the public at large, is kind of like, oh, no, this is too much, And so, like, you talk about like that kind of thing when you're taking someone who's obviously maybe not obviously, but maybe saying some things that aren't true, and then reacting to that, in a musical light based on another 15 years of context,
And I mean, just to put it in a simple way, I just see that the trombone versus the body that I'm playing in, that these two things, there's the human body and then there's the brass instrument, is that the brass instrument is that other world that's hard to describe, and that just represents something that is scary, that is that abyss, that is that part of the world that is so messed up that we don't even know who's in charge anymore. We don't. I mean, if you believe in that kind of thing, it's like who's actually running the show. You know what I mean? And there's all this. I think there's like a really deep kind of insecurity running that it's like we don't actually know. It's like how everyone who's running for president, we don't know who these people are, and so it's like the guy goes up to talk, and you just know that there's this whole other side, there's this whole other thing going on. And so for me personally, just in relation to that piece, there's the words, and then there's all this other stuff in the back. There's all the war, there's all the controversy, all the money, man, the trillions of dollars, and I don't know. How do you even attempt to get people to even care about this speech in the first place? To even remember that this went on. To even remember that where did it start, man?
It's hard to get people to care about something that happened 6 months ago.
Exactly.
But something that happened 12 years ago that radically changed the direction of a country.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's kind of like the trombone is an opportunity to speak some other kind of truth, I would say, because you are filtering your thoughts through this thing that can make all kinds of different sounds that, in the right context can be interpreted to mean something. That's up to you. That's up to you. But the choices that you make with those sounds, that the disturbing, scary sound, when you put it next to a speech, I think those two things put together, like a collage or something like that, just very simply, people draw their own conclusion from it. There was this the Kuleshov experiment where you had a picture of a guy staring at you, and then different images would come. After you would see the image of the guy, and it would be face of dude followed by woman lying on the couch, and that equals lust. Face of dude followed by a plate of spaghetti equals hunger. So it's speech being said by a trombone player, and then fucking crazy stuff coming out of the horn. I mean, what are you supposed to think? What are you supposed to? So that's kind of up to you, to draw your own conclusion from it.
And I think, I heard you play that. At this point, I guess it's about a month and a half ago now.
Yeah, I guess so.
And I come back to it in my head on a fairly regular basis.
Okay. Still
kind of like struggling with how I feel about it.
It's
kind of a. So and I think I thought that was a pretty good example of all these things that we've been trying to work through over the past, the past like hour and a half we've been talking.
Yeah.
Like it's really cool. We do have to wrap this up. So, well, Felix, thanks so much. This has been really great.
Thank you, man.
Got through a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I hope some of it made sense. It's like navigating.
It's pretty great, but awesome.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Admiral Kelly, Captain Card, officers and sailors of the USS Abraham Lincoln. By fellow Americans, major combat operations in Iraq have ended! In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed. And now is engaged in securing and reconstructing that country. Because of you, our nation is more secure. Because of you, the tyrant has fallen and Iraq is free. Operation Iraqi Freedom was carried out with a combination of precision and speed and boldness the enemy did not expect and the world had not seen before. You have shown the world the skill and the might of the American armed forces. And tonight, I have a special word for Secretary Winslow, for General Franks, and for all the men and women who wear the uniform of the United States. America is grateful for its sovereignty. When Iraqi civilians looked into the faces of our servicemen and women, they saw strength, kindness, and goodwill. When I look at the members of the United States military, I see the best in our country, and I am honored to be your commander-in-chief. In the images of fallen statues, we have witnessed the arrival of a new era. For 100 years of war, culminating in the nuclear age. Military technology was designed and deployed to inflict casualties on an ever-growing scale. In defeating Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, Allied forces destroyed entire cities. Everything's lean. Who started the conflict were safe until the final days. Military power was used to end a regime by breaking a nation. Today we have the greater power to free a nation by breaking a dangerous and aggressive regime. With new tactics and precision weapons, we can achieve military objectives without directing violence against civilians. No device of man can remove the tragedy from war. Yet it is a great advance when the guilty have far more to fear from war than the innocent. In the images of celebrating Iraqis, we have also seen the ageless appeal of human freedom. Decades of lies and intimidation could not make the Iraqi people love their oppressors or desire their own enslavement. Men and women in every culture need liberty like they need food and water and air. Everywhere that freedom arrives, humanity rejoices, and everywhere that freedom stirs, let tyrants fear. We have difficult work to do in Iraq. We're bringing order to parts of that country that remain dangerous. We're pursuing and finding leaders of the old regime who will be held to account for their crimes. We've begun the search for hidden chemical and biological weapons, and already know of hundreds of sites that will be investigated. We are helping to rebuild Iraq, where the dictator built palaces for himself instead of hospitals and schools. And we will stand with the new leaders of Iraq as they establish a government of, by, and for the Iraqi people. The transition from dictatorship to democracy will take time, but it is worth every effort. Our coalition will stay until our work is done, and then we will leave, and we will leave behind a free Iraq. The Battle of Iraq is one victory in a war on terror that began on September the 11th, 2001, and still goes on.